The following views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the official position of the participants. Sides of the debate have been assigned randomly in order to create conflict, comedy, awkwardness, and embarrassment. Any resemblance between their true feelings coinciding with the side of the debate that has been dealt to them is purely coincidental.
This is going to be genuinely difficult for you.
Well, I think I have, if I think about it, I could say one or two things about it. I remember in my my recapping episode on Spectre, I did voice some pros to this, but
yeah,
there's only so much you can do. So, John, we're on to episode 4 already of this little show we're doing. Yes. I think today we have an interesting subject. It's a much talked about topic within recent Bond fandom, especially because this includes Spectre. And it's about the Blofeld stepbrother, foster brother, whatever you want to call them, foster brother thing. And I saw that you get to defend why this is a horrible idea for Bond and Blofeld to be stepbrothers.
I could do that.
And so you get to attack it. I have to defend why this is a brilliant idea. So, yeah. That's a hard one for me.
Well, I'll put out some of the cons that I felt about this. And this could get deep, but I don't want to go too crazy with it.
All right. I'm curious.
I still think, I think I'm always going to think it was a mistake for them to have brought Blofeld into Craig's films and Spectre. I don't think he should have been introduced in the Craig films or Spectre, because they had established Mr. White and Quantum. You know all this. We've discussed this. Is that that they introduced them early on, right from Casino Royale. We saw Mr. White, and with Quantum of Solace, it seemed like that was going to be their version of Spectre. It was going to be a new revamped Spectre.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, Eon was able to obtain the rights to Spectre and Blofeld, and all of a sudden they had to retrofit all this continuity, Craig's continuity, under this one roof of Spectre. And it was so anticlimactic. It was just such a letdown that there was no natural build-up to this giant reveal of the Blofeld, it's a main guy who's behind all this. Because a lot of the connective tissue that they were trying to manufacture by saying, Blofeld was behind all this, it didn't really make a lick of sense in a lot of instances.
No, it felt really stitched together. There's no way they planned all of this out, but they made it seem like they did.
Yeah, it was so. We all knew that it wasn't planned out, and by them trying to make it work, it just it didn't work. In fact, I sometimes thought how in the Connery movies with the early Connery movies, they did a better job of setting up Blofeld, and whether it was unintentional or not, because they were filming all those the novels all over the place, out of order and everything. Mm-hmm. But they started establishing this mysterious figure of Blofeld and Spectre right from Dr. No throughout Connery's films. And skipping over, I guess, Goldfinger, he wasn't mentioned at all, or Spectre or anything.
Yeah.
Over the course of 4 movies, like they had already established this mysterious guy with the white cat and like wondering about it. So when finally Donald Pleasance shows up, it was like we'd already this was the big climax of seeing who this guy is. This is like, the payoff. With the Craig films, you could see like they just, and we all know, they just try to shove him in and Spectre in at the last moment because I guess silly fan service and like to make us all hoot and holler. But realistically, it didn't make any sense. Like, why all of a sudden, oh, he's the overseer of all this stuff.
Yeah.
There was no like real dramatic weight to it. And then the fact that they tried to make him and James Bond have a history together, like a childhood history, it just seemed manufactured in a way to make him a more important character because they didn't naturally build him up through the course of films. It was almost like a Cliff Notes shorthand of why we should care about this character, saying, well, him and Bond, like they hung out together as children.
Yeah.
Who cares? And it didn't even pay off in any way in the movie. Like, oh, this is my my childhood friend who betrayed me, and like.
Exactly. Now, do you think in No Time to Die they're gonna reference them being stepbrothers again? Because I think they probably won't even mention that.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Yeah, I don't think so. Like they'll mention their history or anything.
Yeah.
It just seemed. I think they realized it was kind of a weak connection to make between like this hero and villain.
I think so too. Yeah.
But like they already introduced him. They got to stick with the continuity, so they're going to bring in Christoph Waltz, and they'll have like it's probably going to be like one scene between those two in the jail, talking, and they're probably not going to talk about, oh, hey, remember the good old times with my dad?
Yeah, when we were climbing mountains. Yeah. This is a hard one for me to defend. But I guess what you could say for the Craig films is how they at least attempted to try and give most of the characters and story elements from the classic films some more of an origin and more background, a little bit more weight. Like, we didn't just get Moneypenny. We got introduced to her in the field, and we see the chemistry, and then it's established that her and Bond may or may not have had a romantic, moment. We don't know if something happened, but that's kind of the point of the Moneypenny character. And, they did the same with bringing in the male M. They did it with even the car, the DB5, gets a bit of an origin in Casino Royale, and comes back a few times. So I think their thinking must have been like, okay, we know they got the rights to Spectre. They wanted to use it as soon as possible. I could agree on you that they used it too soon. They could have continued with Quantum. But I think their thinking was, all right, we're going to use Spectre. We can't just go like the old days and bring in some mysterious, unrelated guy at the head of this, and be it Blofeld. There has to be a personal connection. That's the thing with Craig's films. It's always personal. It always has to be. There always has to be something. So I think their thinking must have been like, okay, if he's the ultimate Bond nemesis, like he's supposed to, well, at least in the Connery films he is, like he's supposed to be. We're gonna have to give it a reason as to why he is who he is. So I think that's why they went with the stepbrother thing, which is even more unfortunate because Austin Powers did it too.
Yeah,
I don't think that even crossed their minds how
that's the whole idea. Like when they do like
smart
they're
move.
like the hero and villain are siblings. It's almost become a parody. It's like they have to be family. Like, oh, my brother's the one behind all this, or like he's my father. It's almost become so overdone. It's such a silly cliche and predictable that it doesn't have any weight to it as much as like when we saw learn that Darth Vader was Luke's father. Like that was that was a gut punch. But now it's like been so overused and copied. It's almost it's weakened. It's a weakened explanation in some ways.
I agree. It's like I said, it's hard to defend this, but I can appreciate that they at least try to give the Blofeld character a bit more levity and background, like they did with all the classic characters they brought back during Craig's films. The execution, clearly they could have gone with a different explanation. They didn't have to be related, or they didn't have to be growing up together. And it's even if they, it is what it is, but you don't really see much of it in the story either. And now I'm on the attacking side too. I know.
I know. It's easy to be on that side.
Yeah. But because that's the thing. My only defense pretty much is, well, at least they tried, kind of. They tried to give it more. I do appreciate it, honestly, that there is something more than just it being a shadowy figure that Bond never met, never heard of, and he just has to go up against it for the heck of it. There is. I also liked that they tried to make it a bit more. Judi Dench's M was onto this. They always tried to make this more personal as to why Bond would pursue this organization. He still trusts the old M a little bit more than the newer M.
Oh, yeah,
in Skyfall, in Skyfall it was established how he was. He liked Judi Dench's M a lot, so I did like how they kind of went into the personal side of the story, but I'm now trying to think of how they could have done it better. Still make it personal, but not make it a stepbrother thing. There could have been some, maybe the Vesper thing. Maybe so he was connected to that. So maybe they could have pushed it more towards that direction a little bit more. So he was the author of all his pain. Fair enough, okay, it's shoehorned in, but I think if you're gonna introduce Blofeld in the newer films, they probably had no choice but to try and make it. They had to give him a reason to be the arch nemesis. They had to give him a reason to not just be some random guy stroking a cat and kill Bond like the Connery films for without a clear motive.
But wouldn't you think, by the time, like, You Only Live Twice is almost comparable to Spectre in the sense, okay, he's finally they're facing off Bond and Blofeld together. That Blofeld was almost like behind every little incident that like Connery was his adventures, and like it was always this in the background that there was this evil organization.
Yeah.
So it builds up and like, okay, now we're gonna have the confrontation between this guy. With Craig, they had that laid out. It irritates me so much, that great ending of Casino Royale when he finally catches up to Mr. White and he's the guy. He's the guy. We understand like he's not even like the way they gave him his name, Mr. White. Mr. White, that sounds like a very mysterious, almost anonymous kind of figure. Like you could see like how like he could have just been the substitute of Blofeld for this era, because we know like they didn't have access to Blofeld. That was always my thought. It's like he was going to be the substitute Blofeld, and then like we were going to find out, okay, Quantum, that was going to be the substitute Spectre and everything.
Yeah.
And they established this. I mean, when Casino Royale ended, I couldn't wait. I was like, boy, I hope we find out more about this guy and that, all this.
Yeah, and it kind of seemed at that point like they have more ideas of where they're going with this next.
Or at least like some groundwork to build on.
Yeah.
And then they did the quantum thing, and then they just chucked it. They chucked all that almost like world building in favor of going with the more recognizable Spectre, Blofeld. We just got the rights back. Well, let's put it in the script. We'll call the movie Spectre. We're so excited to use it.
Yeah, and Quantum will just be part of Spectre. Done.
Yeah, like an arm of Spectre or something.
It's just one division. Yeah, I agree. It's that I can't really argue against that. Although I could say, to me, Mr. White always seemed like he wouldn't be the new Blofeld, but he would be a high-ranking member. And I always assumed, like, at the end of Casino Royale, like Bond now has a really good lead to get to the head of Quantum.
So he'd be like a number one or a number two.
Yeah, or maybe some sort of assassin or a high-ranking. He was a high-ranking member of Quantum. I think that's what he's supposed to be. Heck, in Spectre even, as was revealed in Spectre the movie, that he was in fact working for them. It's the same organization, but I do appreciate that they try to keep the continuity working. You could, in retrospect, watch Casino Royale and Quantum, even Skyfall and Spectre, and see the continuity if you watch them close together. But it's clearly, like you said, manufactured and stitched together later. And
in a way, Connery's movies, his first 5 movies, and Craig's 5 movies, they almost mirror each other in a way.
Yeah.
In the fact with when Goldfinger came out, there was no connection to Spectre or Blofeld.
Yeah, just like Skyfall.
And instead of it would be like almost like Thunderball trying to retrofit Goldfinger into being a Spectre agent.
I think I mentioned that to you at some point. Maybe in that trailer discussion we did.
Yeah.
Imagine if Goldfinger all of a sudden was revealed to be part of Spectre.
Yeah, it's an interesting...
Because that's kind of how it felt. Because Silva felt very disconnected from Spectre and Quantum. He felt like a standalone villain with his own motives against M. And in Spectre they go like, oh yeah, Silva was part of Spectre too. He's connected.
Yeah, somehow. Yeah. I mean, does that like lessen the bad guy for you, the Bond villain, if he is not related to Spectre? If everything like in all the James Bond adventures, all the bad guys that he goes after has to be related to Spectre. There's no solo bad guys out there that need to be taken care of or have their own agendas and stuff. It's okay. It could be like, there could be some other bad guys working with their own motives than just like working for Blofeld.
Yeah.
Like they didn't have to do that with Silva, I don't think.
No, and now it seems like they're doing it with Safin as well. He's most likely also connected in some way to Spectre or somehow. Yeah. So Craig will have his entire run of Bond films will be Spectre villains, actually. In retrospect, only. We only found out until Spectre, the 4th film, that they're all connected. But still, in retrospect, they're all part of the same group of people. Again, I am genuine when I say, because I know a lot of people aren't. I do appreciate the continuity in the Craig films. I think the modern day film. Well, I never claimed they did a good job on it, but the modern day, I like that they're it's potentially one universe with a part 1 or 2, part 1 to 5, so to speak, and it's not just like the Brosnan films, like four separate
almost standalones. Like it never bothered me, and I know like continuity is so big now because of the Marvel movies and superhero movies and Star Wars and all this stuff, but it never really bothered me with the older Bond films kind of being their own separate missions, and maybe like there's a little connective tissue here and there between the character, like he mentions that he was married once, and like just to remind everyone or to reinforce this is the same character. Because like the continuity, like it's funny, and I guess like maybe younger kids would get confused if they watch like the older films and they watch them in order. And they see like, okay, we just finished You Only Live Twice. Wait, now we're on to Majesties. How does he not recognize Blofeld? They don't know each other now and stuff. Like it makes very little sense. There's no
continuity is very little in the older films. I think this is a separate topic, but like I told you a couple of days ago, I think that continuity problems between the Bond actors could easily be fixed if you don't apply the code name. I'm against the code name theory too. Right. Watch every Bond actor's run of movies as a separate universe, like we do with Craig's films. If you watch Connery's Bond films as a separate universe, and then Lazenby has his own universe, then it makes sense that, Lazenby's James Bond didn't meet Blofeld yet, and Connery's did, and
that
Diamonds
would
is
fix
kind
everything.
Diamonds is kind of a sequel to He Only Lived Twice too. There's no mention of Tracy, and it starts in Japan, and so you could potentially watch them in that way, but. Yeah, and then it also makes sense, like, there's no Spectre in Roger Moore's films, for example. So that's another.
Well, I guess in a way you could say he does finally kill Blofeld.
In For Your Eyes Only.
Even though they don't say it's. I don't even know how they got away with that, honestly, because it's so clear that guy was Blofeld.
Yeah.
But yet they didn't have the rights to it. Yeah, I don't know how they were able to sneak that through.
Did McClory ever sue them on?
I never heard of it. I wouldn't be if I was him. I would have. I was like, "What are you talking about? You got a bald guy. You got a cat. That's my character. You're not allowed to use him."
Yeah. But it's a tough one. But I think the consensus for all Bond fans is, they shouldn't have been stepbrothers. It's not Austin Powers. It's hard to defend that.
Do you think it would have worked better if they didn't have any history together and Bond just meets this character whose name straight out is Blofeld? He doesn't have any history with Bond. He doesn't have any.
I don't know. I think they were right to try and give it, not by making them stepbrothers, but they try and give them some history or at least a connection, more than if all of a sudden the shadowy figure is, because what would the motive be for this shadowy figure to be so fixated on but then again,
00 agent.
Yeah, but it could also be, if you attack this and not make it personal, like, he just happens to be head of the organization and Bond intervenes with his plans, and that's why, that's how it goes with most villains in the Bond film series. So they could have gone with that, but I think they felt like that would have been too cliche to just have a shadowy figure with a cat with no motives, but all of a sudden be introduced. They probably felt like they needed to give him this background, and clearly they didn't go with the smartest option in what ways they could have made it a connection to Bond, but they went with the stepbrother thing. Yeah.
I think I would have been all right if they had dropped the stepbrother thing, and it was and they just left it. Well, you disrupted my plans with Le Chiffre, Mr. Bond. Like, I had money invested in that airline or something. Like there was reasons, like.
Yeah.
Blofeld had his fingers in the pie of some of the incidents that Bond disrupted. He says, I invested in water with Mr. Green. You cost me $5 billion, Mr. Bond, with your,
Yeah. I think if I was one of the writers to Spectre, I probably would have ended up coming to the point where I had to, because, that's the latest film. Okay, we're doing Spectre. Got it. We got to have Blofeld. I think I would have ended up somehow interweaving Quantum and Spectre too, even if that's not what we wanted. But as a writer, I think that's the direction you have to go in. Like you said just now, if you could make it a connection to the airline or the oil from Mr. Green, so you would have also made it part of Quantum. I think it's inevitable if you're one of the writers and you want to connect it to the previous films, that you got to somehow weave Quantum into this. Yeah. I did like that they brought back Mr. White in some way.
Yeah,
I think that was I like that bit.
Craig is going to leave. A new Bond coming up eventually, and who knows how long that'll be, probably. Yeah. But do you think they will use Blofeld and Spectre again for the next Bond actor? They're going to incorporate that organization and that character in with his movies?
Depends on what they're doing. I think it's not. I think they're going to have to shelve it for a while. But like I mentioned before in some of our in a discussion video between us, I was always a fan of bringing in Nolan and do like a trilogy, like a standalone trilogy.
Yeah.
They could, if they do something like that next, they could bring in like a completely standalone and bring in a new Spectre kind of trilogy. They could do it that way, but if they just start clean sheet, new Bond, and they immediately start off with Spectre again and Blofeld, it will probably remind us too much of the film Spectre itself. Yeah, it's hard. What do you think?
I would bet $1 that they're going to stick with continuity in the next run, and they're going to have it more planned out than what has happened with Craig. They're going to keep a continuity going in between films, I think.
Yeah, that's why I would argue like a trilogy that's planned out beforehand would potentially be a good idea. Maybe if you want to go with the modern day thing of having continuity and bringing back classic elements in a modern way, or even do it in a period piece, then at least plan it out. I hope they learned from that during the Craig films. And it's not like they didn't have much time in the Craig. I mean, it's the longest tenure of Bond films we've had, and still it felt like they only start planning these things like a couple of months before production starts.
It's funny because we know the continuity craze right now, and you see to what lengths the Marvel movies go to maintain continuity between all these different series of films and television and all this stuff. Here, it's just one series that Babs and Mike are focused on. So they it shouldn't be that hard to remember, okay, this is what we did in the last film. This is where we're going to go in this film. Yeah. We're going to pick up on those characters or that element or stuff like that. So maybe it's because they're not used to it, because it's been so long since they've been doing that since Brosnan, and they're so used to just having standalone films. They're just not adjusted to doing a continuing series, and that's what I think that's what most audiences expect.
Yeah. I think, and they're not used to, if they write a new Bond film, it's just going to be the one film they think about, like they are used to with the Brosnan films, and they end up painting themselves into a corner.
They go one at a time, and they don't think 2 steps ahead later.
No. I think that's something they could learn if they continue, regardless of when that's going to be. No Time to Die.
I do think they're going to be more conscious of that in the next run.
Yeah.
Them pulling out Blofeld and Spectre, I don't know, because that was another thing. They named the movie Spectre, so it would seem kind of weird to me to have a new Bond and then all of a sudden you pull out Spectre and Blofeld, and we got it so fresh in our minds that Christoph Waltz and it was Daniel Craig's Blofeld. Now, this is a new Blofeld.
Yeah.
Maybe they just try to create their own villain, or just leave him alone for a while. Or
the period piece. Just go with something completely different. I think that would solve a lot of those problems. Just make it set in the 60s or 50s. Do it. Throw it overboard. Maybe do it completely different. Then maybe you could bring in a different type of Spectre, a different unrelated, no stepbrother thing. But
we know he's going to show up in No Time to Die. Is there anything that they could do with Blofeld, Christoph Waltz's Blofeld, to fix the stepbrother thing, other than just not mentioning it?
No. No, that's. They can't just throw in a line like, actually, it turns out we didn't have the same father, the same. They can't do that. Well, so Oberhauser clearly was their, his father.
Well, actually, I don't know if we talked about this. Did you read that little article, that interview with Fukunaga? And he had said something about when Bond is strapped in the chair in Blofeld's, the rest of the movie is happening in his head. It's just completely erased. I know, I even remember mentioning
I thought that
once.
I thought that was one of your theories. I never knew Fukunaga
has said that. Fukunaga.
Oh, yeah, that does ring a bell, but
it was in some recent interview or something. He said It was mentioned. But like, suppose like we learned that the last, what was it, 40 minutes of Spectre didn't happen, and like maybe they could somehow wipe out that those two were brothers or half brothers.
It still wouldn't work because it's established early on in Spectre with the picture.
Yeah.
That came from the Skyfall box. So it still wouldn't work.
See, it's a tough box for them to get out of.
Yeah, they painted themselves in a corner.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh well.
So hopefully, like, the next villain won't have any kind of family history with Bond.
Yeah, I bet he's his cousin.
Yeah.